Hey guys, it's Kaylee, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here for a bit of a different video. I decided that I didn't think it would be right to just post my usual Friday reads today, and instead I thought I would recommend to you some of my favourite Black authors, some books that I've read from Black authors that are my favourites. And also to talk you through some of the books that I'm planning on reading in the near future that I've got on my shelf. I wanted to address what was going on in the world because it's horrific, it is heartbreaking, and it makes me angry, to be honest. And I think the worst thing that we can do right now is to stay silent, and to not vocally stand with the Black community. So a lot of people, myself included, have been asking the question, like, what can I do to help, but also to not just now but forever, what can I do to help and to support? And I think for me the biggest thing is education. Educating yourself, starting conversations with people, and really just taking ownership of our own ignorance on the subject. So I want to, again, not just now but always, educate myself on racism and white privilege and understand the Black experience. And I say that Black experience in inverted commas because I think that there are so many different Black experiences, and I think that's why it's important to seek out as many resources and as much content as possible to really give ourselves the most well-rounded knowledge. So for me it's important to read all of these non-fiction books that are being recommended that I've seen all over my feeds, and I have a few of them here to talk about. But for me it's also important to read from Black authors and to hear from Black creators, full stop. Regardless of whether they're talking about race, they could be talking about Black relationships, Black families, mysteries, fantasy, all of the things that I read from a white perspective. I want to read from a Black perspective too, because why do I read? I read because I want to learn about people and I want to learn about experiences. And so for me, that is just as important as reading about racial issues, because those people's lives are important, regardless of that injustice. And so that is why today I am going to recommend a mixture of books about race and some in which race is not the central topic. And then I have a list of books that I am hoping to get to in the near future. So the first book that I have that I would like to recommend is the only non-fiction book that I have in this stack, and that is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. So Bryan Stevenson is a lawyer, and he has in this book basically spoken about one of his first defendants named Walter McMillan, who was a Black man accused of the murder of a white woman, and this was a crime that he did not commit, and he was on death row for this crime. So Bryan talks about this case in detail, as well as a number of other cases that he worked on, and he also talks about his own life, growing up and becoming a lawyer and getting involved in this whole world of injustice. This is a really important book if you want to educate yourself on the corrupt justice system in America. I think that it is very accessible. It's a very difficult read, but it is just utterly unacceptable, the things that are done in this book to these people. Like, it just blew my mind when I read it, and it really opened my eyes to what was happening. So I would definitely recommend this one. The next books that I have, the first fiction books, are from my favourite author of all time, and that is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So I have Purple Hibiscus and also Half of a Yellow Sun. Half of a Yellow Sun is my favourite book of all time. So these two books, they're both set in Nigeria. So Purple Hibiscus follows a 15-year-old girl who lives basically in fear of her father. So he is a very fierce Catholic, and he's very well respected in the community, but at home he is very fanatically religious, it says, and so it's a little bit of a different story at home. And so this book is basically a coming of age story. It is about this young girl's upbringing and about her life. And it says on the back, it's about childhood and adulthood, love and hatred, and the grey spaces in which truths are revealed and true living is begun. So this one was amazing, and I would definitely recommend. And then the other one, Half of a Yellow Sun, I just absolutely loved. So this book is set in the 1960s in Nigeria, so the country is in the midst of civil war, and we follow three characters and how their lives intersect. So we follow a young boy who works as a houseboy for a university lecturer. We follow a young woman named Olana who has abandoned her privileged life and is now living with her new lover, the professor. And then we also follow an English man named Richard who is basically in love, if I remember correctly, with Olana's twin sister. So yeah, this book really just talks about these three people's lives and how they intersect and how the war kind of impacts their lives, and it was just absolutely beautiful. It blew me away and I just absolutely loved it, so definitely recommend this one. The next book that I have is Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. So this was actually the first Jacqueline Woodson book that I have read, and she has quite an extensive backlist both for adult readers and young adult readers. So if you're looking for something that is a little bit more accessible for younger readers, I would definitely recommend her as an author. But this book is a very slight novel, and this essentially follows two families that have been brought together from different worlds through an unplanned pregnancy. So we open the book with Melody. Yep, she is 16 years old and she is her coming out ceremony, and she is wearing a custom made dress that was intended for her mother but then was ultimately never worn because of her pregnancy with Melody. And so this is essentially I hesitate to use the word family saga because, you know, that kind of makes you think of this long sort of sweeping epic, which obviously just looking at the length of this novel, that's not what this is. But it kind of has that same feeling, like after you finish reading it, you feel like you have experienced a family epic. It follows the lives of each of the characters in this family. So we see Melody, we see her parents, we see her grandparents, and it is just absolutely beautifully constructed. Like there is no word in this book that is unimportant. Yeah, it's just lovely. So it says here, Red at the Bone explores sexual desire, identity, class, and the life-altering facts of parenthood. So this was just amazing, and yeah, definitely recommend Jacqueline Woodson as an author. The next book that I have is one of my favourite books of all time, and that is The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This one has been much beloved on BookTube, so I won't talk about it for very long, but this one does focus on our main character Cora, who works on a slave plantation, and she is kind of a bit of an outcast even from her fellow African Americans, and so her existence is a bit of a struggle, and she's a young adult, so she's kind of just coming into her womanhood. And then a man turns up on the plantation named Caesar, and he talks about the Underground Railroad, which is in this case an actual underground railroad in which they can travel from place to place and escape their plantation and their captivity. So yeah, this one was amazing. I absolutely loved it. I think the characterization in this book is what makes it so amazing, and so real, and it really sparked in me the need to go and research this side of American history, because as a lot of people have said, that is, you know, we learn next to nothing about American history in our UK schools. So yeah, really, really enjoyed this one. This is actually one that I definitely want to reread very soon, but I think it's a very good one. The next book that I have to recommend is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. So this one, again, is one of my favourite books of all time. I absolutely loved it. And this one, I think, is set in Nigeria. Yeah, Nigeria in the 1980s. And we basically follow a married couple who are trying everything in order to get pregnant. So they've tried all of the conventional ways, they've had medical consultations, but they've also tried much more spiritual things. You know, they've gone on pilgrimages to these holy places, they've pleaded to God, and nothing seems to be working. And so the husband's relatives insist that he take another wife, because obviously it is the wife's fault. And so that's basically where the story kind of takes off. We have this sort of triangle of characters, and it looks at the relations between them, the love, the hatred, the jealousy, and how these people interact, and the impact that the family members have on this relationship as well. So I absolutely loved this one. This is compulsively readable, really exciting, and it has stayed with me, excuse the pun, for a very long time, and it has remained one of my favourite books of all time. So definitely recommend that one. And then lastly, I have a young adult pick. So I've decided to mention The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas, which I know is a lot of people's favourite books. It is loved by a lot of people, but I wanted to mention it just so that I had a young adult recommendation in here. And I do definitely think that this one is a very important book, especially if you are only just starting to kind of want to learn about these topics. So this one is extremely relevant, and it is very much about race. So this follows a young girl named Star who lives in a sort of poor neighbourhood, but she goes to a school that is out with her town and is much more upper class. So she is kind of split between these two very different worlds, and interacts with people from very different backgrounds when she's at home and then when she's at school. And one day she witnesses the shooting of her unarmed best friend by a police officer, and this sparks action in Star, our main character, and it talks about how all of the different people in her life react to this event, which is brutally honest, and basically the events that follow after this has happened. Yeah, like I said, it is very important, it's very raw and honest, and I think it is a really important read, especially for a younger audience. So those are all of my recommendations. I'm now going to just talk very briefly about the books that I have on my TBR that I'm going to pick up very soon. Some of these I've had for a little while and I've not picked them up yet, and some of them are more new acquisitions for me. So I have 3 non-fiction books at the top of the stack. So the first one is Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. So this one has been all over the place. A lot of people are recommending this one. And yeah, again, I'm really interested in reading this. I think what's important about this book is that it talks about race and racism in the UK rather than America. And I think, you know, rightly so, that is being spoken about a lot at the moment. But quite often the response from British people is that, oh, racism isn't as bad in the UK, which is obviously a complete lie. And I think this is probably very eye-opening on that subject. There's a quote on the back from The Observer which says, "A wake-up call to a nation in denial," which I think is very true. So this one I think came from a blog post that Rennie Edo-Lodge posted, I think in 2014, I want to say. Yeah, a blog post she posted in February 2014 of the same name, and I think that sparked such a reaction that she decided to write a book on the subject. From what I've heard, it is a very sort of introductory level discussion about the topic, which isn't to put it down at all, but I think is important then for pretty much everybody to read it because it is very accessible. And so I am excited to get to this one, and I think, yeah, a lot of people have said it's really accessible, it's quite a quick read, so there isn't really any reason to not pick it up. And I should say that there are so many free resources at the moment that are flying around the internet that I think it would probably take about a 5-minute Google search to find something online to educate yourself. And so I should have said that at the beginning, that, you know, if you don't have the means to pick up and buy or get your hands on these books, definitely spend just a tiny amount of time online trying to find information that will help you, and even that little thing will do a lot in the long run. So the next non-fiction book that I have is Maya Angelou's first volume of her autobiographical series. So this is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I embarrassingly know very little about Maya Angelou, but I have had this book on my shelf for a very, very long time, and I think that it would be an important story to hear. Again, this is just one Black experience, but I think it's really important to get a first-hand account. You know, it's her writing about her own life, and I think that is really important. So this book, I think, covers her childhood years as a Black child living in the American South in the 1930s. So yeah, excited to try this one out. And then the last non-fiction pick that I have is Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward. So Jesmyn Ward has written several fiction books, and I have read one of hers. I've read Sing Unburied Sing, which I really enjoyed. But this one I have wanted to pick up for a very long time, and I bought this quite recently. And this is her memoir, and she basically talks about how in her small town in Mississippi, she, over the space of 4 years, lost 5 young Black men that were close to her, including her brother, to accidents, murder, suicide, a number of different things. And I think this book is obviously Jesmyn talking about her own experience dealing with these losses, but obviously discussing the idea of race, and that you know, the fates of these young men were, it says on the back, predetermined by who they were and where they were from. And I think that it's going to be a difficult and challenging read, but a very important one, so I'm excited to get to that. So now I have 6 fiction books on my shelf that I'm going to run through quickly. So the first one is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. So this is one that I've picked up quite recently. It's had a mixed response, but I am interested in reading this one. This is a story of a young girl who is a babysitter for a quite wealthy white woman, and she is in a supermarket with the white child, and she is apprehended because people think she kidnapped the child. That's literally all I know about this. I think it is quite a fast-paced story, and a lot happens following this event, and yeah, it just sounds quite interesting, and one that I am excited to pick up. I think it's quite interesting when stories like this, you know, this has become very, I guess, like mainstream fiction. It's quite widely known, and so it's interesting to see how the themes are going to be handled, but I think it's also good because it's fallen into a lot of people's hands that maybe wouldn't read a book about this subject. So yeah, looking forward to that one. I then have 2 books by Essie Edugyan. So this is Washington Black, which is her most recent novel, I believe, and then I also have Half-Blood Blues as well. So both of these books I have not read, and I am very excited to. So the first book is historical fiction, and it is set in 1940 in Paris, I believe, and it is about a man who was arrested in a cafe when he was 20 and he was never heard from again. And then I think we follow the story 50 years later when his friend and the only witness from that day is going back to Berlin, and he is persuaded by someone else that there is more to the story, and brings some secrets to light. This one sounds like a really interesting sort of mystery, I guess. It's about friendship and betrayal, hidden secrets, and yeah, it just sounds really interesting. And then her other book, Washington Black, I'm sure was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize, and this one sounds so good. So this one, we follow an 11-year-old boy named Washington Black who works on a sugar plantation in Barbados, which is owned by two Englishmen, and one of the Englishmen, I think, is a bit of an inventor, a bit of an explorer, and he wants to build an aerial machine, I guess, like a hot air balloon. And so he asks this young boy, Washington Black, to help him. And so that's really all I want to know about this, but I've heard that it is a very exciting like adventure story, and they visit quite a few different countries around the world. So yeah, I'm excited to get to this one. I think it'll be a very exciting, fun ride. And then I have two books by a British writer, and this is Zadie Smith. So again, she is super popular, so I don't really need to speak about her for very long, but I have wanted to read Zadie Smith for a very long time, which is why I keep buying her books, but I've not read any of them. So On Beauty, I think this won not the Booker Prize, it won the Women's Prize for Fiction one year, so I definitely want to read it because of that. But this one sounds exactly like my sort of cup of tea. It's about two feuding families, and I guess it's kind of like a character study of these people. That's really all I know about it. I know that they are connected through different love affairs and different dramas and scandals, so yeah, I'm excited to try this one out. And then I also have Swing Time by Zadie Smith, which is set in London, New York and West Africa, and it's about two young girls who dream of being dancers, and only one of the girls actually has the talent to be successful, it seems. So it says it's the story of finding happiness in the meanest of places and feeling sad when all around you are happy. It's about the choices we make and the choices made for us. So I think this is really a story about friendship ultimately, and it just sounds really interesting. So I'm excited to get to Zadie Smith. And then lastly, I have a bit of a chunker. It's really heavy. This is An Orchestra of Minorities by Chigozie Obioma. So I read his previous book, I think it was his debut, The Fisherman, and I really enjoyed that one. So I have this bad boy. This, from what I have heard, is quite a unique story. So I think it is set in Nigeria. Again, I clearly like stories set in Nigeria. And we follow a young man who is a chicken farmer, and he witnesses a woman about to jump off a bridge to her death, basically. And so he rushes to her side, horrified, and he throws his two like prized chickens off of the bridge, basically to show her what she was about to do and how severe of an action that was. And so she appreciates his act of sacrifice, and I think they start to get to know one another and form a bit of a romantic bond, and the story kind of goes from there. It does say in the inside flap, which I didn't know, that this is a contemporary twist on Homer's Odyssey in the mythic style of the Igbo literary tradition. Chigozie Obioma weaves a heart-wrenching epic about the tension between destiny and determination. So yeah, it sounds really, really interesting. Even just from picking it up today, I'm got a newfound excitement about this book, so hopefully I will get to it soon. So those are all of the books that I wanted to mention today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like I said, there's a lot more that we can do to support and to help the Black community, and I think educating ourselves is literally just step one, but it is super important. So let me know if you have any other recommendations for me, because I would absolutely love to hear them, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.